Welcome. Today we're going to tackle a question that has stumped social scientists for, well, centuries. And we're going to do it by examining one of the most controversial answers ever put forward.
I mean, really think about that for a second. You can go to completely different societies with totally different histories and ways of life, and yet you often find very similar hierarchies popping up. How is that possible? Just trying to answer that question has sparked some of the biggest debates out there.
And you've probably heard the usual suspects, right? On one side, you've got people pointing to institutions and history, things like the legacy of colonialism or specific economic policies. And on the other side, you've got people who say it's all about culture, the values, the norms, the things that drive a society's success. These are pretty much the two main explanations we hear all the time.
But then there's this third explanation, one that kind of sidesteps all that messy complexity. It offers up a single, simple, and incredibly provocative variable, intelligence. And this one idea, for better or worse, has been at the very heart of a furious and often really toxic debate for decades. So our way into understanding this whole framework is through Richard Lynn's book, The Global Bell Curve. Now, let's be absolutely clear about something. Our goal here today is not to debate or validate the claims made in this book. Nope. Instead, what we're going to do is deconstruct the system of explanation that it presents. We're going to look at how it works, how the logic is built, and try to understand why this kind of framework keeps showing up in public debates.
All right, so let's get right into the mechanics of the argument. What's the fundamental claim, the engine that makes this whole system run?
At the very heart of it all is something called the intelligence hypothesis. Basically, it's the theory that a population's overall success, everything from its education levels to its average income, is mostly determined by its average cognitive ability, which the book tries to measure using things like IQ scores.
And look, this is laid out right there in the text itself. The author's explicit goal is to take the model that was applied to the United States in the original bell curve and see if it works on a global scale, to use intelligence as the main reason for explaining inequalities between racial groups all over the world.
So, how do you even begin to build an argument like this? Well, it's not just a single claim. It's really a system built by connecting several different layers of our society. Let's break down how that structure is put together.
The argument essentially links together three huge pillars of modern life: our education systems, our labor markets, and even our political structures. The claim is that all these systems work in concert, sorting people into a clear, measurable hierarchy.
The very first link in the chain is education. The argument goes that cognitive ability, or IQ, is the main thing that determines how well a person, and by extension an entire group of people, is going to do in school.
And this is how the evidence for that is presented. The book is just filled with tables, a lot like this simplified example here, that are meant to draw a straight line from a population group to how well they do in school. So you see here, Group A has higher completion rates than B or C. Within this framework, that correlation is shown as the first piece of hard evidence.
Okay, so that's step one. Step two takes those educational results and connects them directly to the economy. The theory here is that in our modern, complex world, the job market just naturally rewards those cognitive skills you demonstrated in school with better jobs and higher pay.
So the next layer of data connects those very same groups to economic outcomes. And you see a pretty similar pattern emerge, right? Group A has higher average earnings and a bigger slice of the professional jobs. The argument uses this data to forge that second link in the chain, from education to economic success.
So here's the final crucial step. After linking intelligence to education and then linking education to income, the system comes to its grand conclusion. It says that the inequalities we can see and measure out in the world, they aren't the result of history or bias or discrimination. No, they are the natural, expected outcome of a meritocratic system just sorting people based on their innate abilities.
But this is where the analysis has to go a little deeper. See, an explanation like this doesn't just exist in a vacuum. We have to ask, what keeps it going? How does an idea like this sustain itself and stick around?
Well, a huge part of the power of this system is its use of numbers. Test scores, income brackets, college admission rates, they all feel so solid, so objective. Numbers like these create a really powerful story that can feel a lot more scientific or real than all that complicated talk about history or culture.
And that perceived objectivity creates an incredibly powerful feedback loop. Let's walk through it. It starts here. Existing inequality, differences in wealth and status, shapes a child's environment, right? Their health, their local schools, their opportunities. Then, those environmental factors go on to impact measurable outcomes, like test scores. But then, and this is the critical third step,
Those very outcomes are then cited as proof of inherent built-in differences between groups. And finally, that proof gets used to justify the very inequality that started the whole cycle. It becomes this perfect closed circuit that reinforces itself. And all of this leads us to the central idea of our explainer today. What happens when our thinking gets trapped inside a loop like that? Well, this is what we're calling the crisis in perception.
So what is this crisis in perception? It's the moment when the map becomes more important than the territory. It's when our tools for measuring the world, the test scores, the income charts, start to feel more real than the messy, complex reality they're supposed to be describing. And all of a sudden, the hierarchies created by our specific, human-made systems start to look like they're just part of the natural order of things.
And the consequence of that shift is just massive. Suddenly, all the messy, interacting forces that actually produce the world we live in, the constant interplay between our biology, our institutions, our environments, and our incentives, all of that amazing complexity just fades away. And it gets replaced by a simple, clean, single-cause story.
And so this leaves us with a really critical question, one that goes way beyond this one book. How do the very systems we build to measure our world end up changing and limiting what we're able to see? And, maybe more importantly, what becomes invisible to us just outside the frame of the tools we choose to use?